Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Ball Over Passion. I'm your boy at George V underscore AFC, and we've got Curran here. Chris is on his way. We're here to talk the Arsenal Man City match review. We got a lot to talk about. A little bit of maybe therapy session needed for some people, I'm sure. Sorry again that we're late. We had a little bit of technical difficulties slash physical difficulties, dog related. We're coming. We're all on our way. It's just been one of those days, and I think it's been one of those last couple weeks for Arsenal when you're starting to talk about kind of what has happened, what people have thought about. Again, sorry for being a little bit late, but we're here. And we're here to break it down because I think it was an interesting game. And I think a lot of people felt like it was a game of two halves. I know that's something kind of I tweeted as well. But when you have a look back, I really think that there was a lot more reasons to be positive in this performance at the very least, even though we didn't get the result that we wanted. Sure, I think one of the major criticisms is we lost it between both boxes, which is not something that you love to hear and talk about. And I'm sure people are annoyed at the fact that we haven't been clinical enough. That's something that I think you could levy at our forwards just in general. In fact, looking back, I think between Eddie and Kedia, Martinelli, if you look at their per 90 XG numbers, it's been halved in terms of what they've been able to score in comparison to their XG, which is not something that you need. But at the same token, that means that other people have to step up. That means there's a lot more reliance on margins. And then at the end of the day, you end up start looking at this team's experience as a potential issue. And it's definitely something that I've kind of talked about in the ether. It's why I haven't put my flag in terms of this team as title favorites or in the title run-in. I've really felt that this experience at some point is going to catch up to the boys. But I think this performance definitely should get people excited for the performance levels returning back to normal. I feel as though Everton and Brentford, I was far more annoyed playing in patches. At Everton, I really don't think we were at the races quite at all. Whereas with Manchester City, we absolutely dominated in the first half. We were definitely the better team in the first half, and not even just by a little margin, but by quite a big margin. And of course, I think second half things changed. But when you do have a look at it, I definitely think that this was a reason to get excited. Previously, we've had very good performances against Manchester City in patches, but I think this is one of the better ones that I've seen just generally. And when you have a look at it, we do have a problem with our number eights that we definitely have to get into. We talk about central dynamic running power. I've talked about this in the past. We're going to get into it. I think there's a problem with the eights. There's some things that I think Zinchenko tried to do to try to mask some of the issues that we were having in the middle of the park that didn't quite work. And they were at the expense, I think, of our wingers. But what we did see is a lot more fervent press. We saw a lot more intensity from the boys, and we saw a little bit of more of a return to the off the ball intensity that I think everybody was craving in the last couple matches, but at least what has made us successful throughout this year. And of course, everybody's favorite polarizing figure, Jorginho, having a phenomenal game, man of the match for us specifically. Kind of silencing some narratives. And, I think that was one of the major positives that I took away, where without Thomas Partey, this team didn't fall apart. And so while I still think that there's some things that we do have to talk to with Mikel about some of the changes and some of the tactical adjustments that we've got from Thomas Partey and the kind of Gabriel Jesus injury, and we'll have a talk about that. How do we solve that problem? I don't think, to be fair, the team's performance was as catastrophic as previous years. And typically a no Thomas Partey meant a no contest in this match, which is not something that you can say. Not only were Arsenal contesting here, but they absolutely were better for one half. Now, of course, you don't get an award for that, but it is worth noting. And we'll talk about how I think some of the statistics brought out a lot more of a different story in general to how the boys performed. But Curran, mate, quickly, how are you? How are you doing? You good?
I'm all right, man. I'm all right. I mean, it's been, I think for both of us, it's been a very hectic day. I think the main thing we can take away from this whole issue I think we've been having is look, we're a very good team. We're missing our main centre forward. I think that showed. I think a lot of the dynamics that we've seen missing and where we tripped up is to do, as George mentioned, with the eights, but also up the pitch a little bit more. We've seen the lack of what we've talked about the last couple of weeks, the lack of rotation, the lack of ability to really maintain people getting into the correct areas at the correct time. And I think that's a major issue that we're going to need to correct. I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see because I think we had this debate just literally about an hour ago about do we think changes are going to come in? Um, is that going to be something that will uh, be interesting to see if it does come out, if it does happen or doesn't happen. I don't know if we do. I hope we do. I think we're calling for it, but in terms of this game specifically, I really feel like there's some good to take away, but there's also some bad to take away as well. I think we have to realize that um, there's a real need, right, for the specific rotations that we've been missing. And I was listening to something, and I know this is a bit off, but I was listening to a I was listening to JJ Redick's podcast earlier today about how he's talking about plays and reads. And I think a lot of the stuff that we're talking about today, and I think it's a major point, and I'm going to try and put it across in this podcast, is we're making the correct plays, but I feel like the reads that other teams are making, and the way we're looking at that, we're too predictable, and we're too um, there's too much uncertainty into what to do when we get into the final third right now. And
I think fundamentally what you're really looking at is a team's approach play being quite good, but then the clinical nature is not there, and that normally amounts to moments in a game and about making the right momentary decisions. But I do think there's somewhat of a structural issue that is causing that clunkiness to occur, and we'll definitely try to talk about it because I do think it's worth noting how we can solve. Because there's some interesting things that I think I saw in this game, and generally when you have a look at it. Bukayo Saka was unplayable, by the way, in this first half. Absolutely outstanding. And, I think Eddie is kind of somebody that you look at as really frustrating figure, for me at least, in this match, because he was making very good decisions in channel running, but his final action was just very poor. He left 3 goals on the pitch, absolutely, at the bare minimum. And so it's really beyond just be lacking maybe a killer, because I do feel as though that we left ourselves, as you say, a little bit predictable in terms of how we attacked. And I think that has to do with people stepping on each other's toes. I think players operated in similar zones, wanting to do the same thing. And it led to kind of a congestion in different areas that meant that we had a specific way of attacking City. And we lack the same fluidity that we've done in previous seasons. And so, or not seasons rather, but matches. So, generally, let's get into it. The very first thing that we're going to talk about is the big Thomas Partey sized hole, and we'll have a talk about what we think we should have seen. And when you saw the lineup, because I think once we figured out, that he wasn't fit, I changed my prediction about how I saw this match
we all
immediately.
did.
Um,
We all
and I
did.
think everybody did. Yeah, and I and I
Yeah.
and I don't think it's illogical to assume lose your best midfielder, lose your arguably best player, and the complexion of the match changes. Absolutely. But how do we solve the Thomas Partey sized hole? And so I'll give you my solution, and then maybe we'll have like a really quick debate about it and what people thought. But fundamentally, what is Thomas Partey to this team? And I've asked this question quite a bit, and he is somebody that has almost 3 jobs in this role. Okay, he is an orchestrator of our attacks. Absolutely, we all know his in possession qualities and what he's done this year. He's got more touches than he does last year, but at the same token, he's making less passes than he did last year. That responsibility of a primary kind of controller has fallen a lot more traditionally to Zinchenko, but Partey is very vital for getting us out of situations in terms of a press and getting us transition from our first phase into the middle third. That was a major problem in this match. Jorginho did a very good job, though, of attempting to do quite a bit of line breakers, which were excellent. I thought he made excellent between the line passes and build up. Did a great job for the penalty and was smart positionally, able to intercept at quite key moments. But one of the issues that you lack with the Thomas Partey is that in possession getting out of trouble. Okay. He is the kickstarter. He orchestrates your attack. We know what he does, okay, between the lines for us. But the major thing that he does is what the defensive portion of this team lacks, and that is recognizing without Thomas Partey, you lack second ball collection and you lack athletic deficiency, particularly when you replace that anchor with a Jorginho who we know struggles in big spaces. So if you know that you're going to be missing these 2 things, then you need to try to solve them in other areas of the pitch. And we know that Jorginho is going to be one measure, and behind him, we're going to have 2 big athletes that can cover big, large spaces. But one thing that you don't have is somebody in the middle of the park to A, collect your second balls, but then B, you don't have that person to then cover large horizontal distances. Thomas Partey is very good at making sure to cover the space if Odegaard and Saka are higher up the pitch, or vice versa on the left. When Xhaka has an ability to interchange with Martinelli, he covers those horizontal wide spaces that we need to have. And we all know that we operate with this 2-3-5 in the final third. So, how do you solve these two things? Well, quite simply, my solution is Gabriel Martinelli right now is struggling being as a touchline winger, and we can talk about why that is the case. Fundamentally, when you have a look at his dribbling, I think there's been a very big confusion about how people view Gabriel Martinelli because off the ball differences are not the same as on the ball. And for me, he's a player on the ball that prefers taking players on the outside, but lacks that horizontal agility to shift on the inside. That's a very key trait because it means on the ball, he struggles to progress on the inside, and he does rely on people, aka Zinchenko, to really provide that thrust. Now, off the ball, he is absolutely able to come on the inside, and in fact, it's what he prefers. But he's no longer able to do this when you've got Eddie Nketiah, who is strictly a person that has kind of got on the last shoulder of the defender, and he doesn't like to do wide overloads. So if you don't have somebody that's willing to go and operate on the wings, then that means that that responsibility has to come from either your fullback or your central midfielder. Now, we both know Zinchenko is somebody that hasn't done well going wide. And in fact, if you go back through this game, the few times that Zinchenko went wide, it was very poor. We struggled, and Mikel immediately switched the tactics to get Zinchenko back inside because it was not working. Now, you could ask Granit Xhaka to do that role, but Granit Xhaka had one of his worst games this season. In fact, his worst game this season was this one. He really struggled to kind of progress the play. And what you end up having is somebody that is unable to make those runs, who then operates in the same zone as Zinchenko. And then you've got a very predictable Martinelli in lane 5 on the widest portion. So, how do we solve this, though? Fundamentally, people aren't going to like this suggestion, but really, I really think that we need to keep that thrust on the lane 5, but add a little bit more verticality. And we talked about central running power in past podcasts, but how do you do this? We talked about gas pedal, people that can increase the possession play. And so, in order for us to do this, you need to replace, for me, Gabriel Martinelli is best on the inside. That is really something that he thrives off. But you can't combine Gabriel Martinelli with a straight line runner, aka you can't combine him with a Kieran Tierney. And if you're going to fix this, what we really need is absolutely ESR back fit. But what I would do is I would increase him, move him to the right central midfield. I would have Xhaka operate as a deeper left central midfielder to sit behind with Jorginho, and I would flank him with Ben White. In this way, you complete the two things that Thomas Partey lacks. You complete the second ball collection, which is Granit Xhaka's primary bread and butter prior to this season. It's something that he absolutely thrives on. And then you also complete the athletic deficiency with having Ben White sit next to Jorginho. That is somebody that is our best horizontal agility acceleration, as well as having probably the best ground running power in our squad. Now, when you flank it with these two, Jorginho then can become the primary receiver in between those three in the middle of the park. And you basically solve what Thomas Partey gives you in all three jobs with those three players. Now, with KT as your lane 5 kind of fullback, what does that mean? He requires somebody that is a pseudo 10 winger, somebody that operates kind of on the inside. And I am describing Trossard perfectly here. This is what the difference needs to occur, because if you replace some of the moments that Xhaka received high up the pitch with Trossard, then absolutely those moments occur. I'm thinking about, I can't remember the minute exactly, but there was that one Eddie Nketiah chance. We build up beautifully. Everybody knows the one I'm talking about. It's on his left foot, and he overhits the pass. If you have Trossard in those areas attacking, I guarantee you he makes the right decision. Trossard's one of the best players in our squad with ball usage. He's one of the best players in our squad in the box. And by having KT at lane 5, you push Trossard mainly on the inside. And so now you've got an option that can change tempo in the left-hand side of the channel that makes very good decisions in tight spaces and is able to shift both in and out. That's so key when you've got somebody that is traditionally bombing on the wing. And whether that's Martinelli, who's a touchline winger, or whether that's KT as a fullback, regardless, the inside player needs to have the ability to go both in and out, and that is Trossard's specialty. He wouldn't stop us in the press, so that becomes key. So then, George, who do you put on the right central midfielder to pair these two? I would put Emil Smith Rowe. We need to give Saka the superstars treatment, and by having Emil Smith Rowe there, you offer a dynamic superiority that can go and combine with Saka and get him on the inside as well. Then you no longer have this kind of isolation of our wingers because both sets of wingers have support. That has been the key. We haven't had that support. And when you introduce Tomiyasu to be your inverted fullback, unfortunately, he competes with zones that Odegaard prefers this season, which is dropping into build-up and becoming one of those middle three players. That is why Ben White's worked so well because he's provided a dynamic overlap. But again, just like on the left-hand side, when we had Granit Xhaka and Zinchenko stepping on each other's toes, then you've got the same thing with Odegaard and Tomiyasu stepping on each other's toes in the same zone. So that for me is how we solve the Biparte conundrum. I think if you don't have ESR, you ask Odegaard to provide that dynamic option. It's not going to be ideal. It's not something that he does particularly well, but it's a band-aid that you need to do until you get a Thomas Partey back. But at the very least, it would allow fluidity in one side to maintain, which our biggest issue has been being far too predictable on the left-hand side. That really is the crux of the reason that our chances have dropped. Our big chances created have dropped significantly, and it's led to less shots on target. So when people are talking about being clinical, the reason that they're relying on being clinical and doing margins is because we're not creating the same number of chances that we did at the beginning of the season. And why is that? It really comes down to having fluid attacking patterns, both on the left, but also the right. The one thing I keep saying is Bukayo Saka is world class. Whether you support him or you don't, that boy will create chances. So there's never going to be a period that the right-hand side doesn't have chances. The issue has become when you combine that really with the left-hand side of the pitch, it isn't the exact same thing. So that absolutely is kind of the tweak that I've been suggesting, with having basically Ben White flank along with Granit Xhaka, Jorginho, so that you cover the Partey hole, and then you add basically Emil Smith Rowe, who adds that vertical running central power, as well as Trossard. So what you're doing now is you flank Eddie Nketiah, who plays on the last line, with two players that operate on the inside that are leggy, have major goal threat, have insane central running power, and make great decisions in terms of being fluid with their wingers, which could be either Bukayo Saka on the right or with Kieran Tierney on the left. And in this way, you essentially have two methods of attack that don't rely on each other. And so that for me is the biggest tweak that I really would like to see. Do I think Mikel will do it? No, I really don't. But that's kind of the biggest thing. And of course, as an update, we know that Emil Smith Rowe is back in the squad and he's available for selection. So that's the biggest issue. And, when you have a look at it, it's, yes, Martinelli wouldn't start, but it's because of the tweak of adding Kieran Tierney, who doesn't operate well with a straight line runner. You can't have Kieran Tierney and Martinelli on the same side. And it's more of a case of kind of sacrificing what Martinelli gives you for better balance. And that needs to be the solution right now, because it's not a matter of picking your favorite players. It's a matter of ensuring what's the best balance for the team. And so it's not necessarily an issue, but again, you may not have seen the link up, but it's the same theory why Kieran Tierney thrived with Emil Smith Rowe in the background. You need to pair that straight line powerful runner with an inside 10, somebody that's capable in and out both sides. That is where we've seen the best of Kieran Tierney. If you're going to have a Zinchenko play, then sure, you can play with a Gabriel Martinelli. But again, we've seen that the relationship between Gabriel Martinelli and Eddie Nketiah be non-existent. Okay, I think he's maybe found Gabriel Martinelli once or twice, and that is because Eddie Nketiah doesn't have the same overlap to these wide wing areas that a Gabriel Jesus does. It's about the movement. That is what's key. That is what we've lost. And so, unfortunately, you have to recognize what your players do. And I don't agree with what Mikel has done lately, by the way, which is, it's one of my biggest frustrations. I said it on Twitter, is I think following an injury to plan A, Mikel's far more likely to go like for like positionally in the absence. But this ignores the profile differences of that replacement. So just replacing your DM with Jorginho versus Thomas Partey, yeah, sure, like he's replaced in the structure, but he performs that role so differently. So you have to adjust yourself to it. And I think in this way, when you have a rethink about it, this provides us with the best chance of getting that central running power back, getting that goal threat back, by the way, which we've lacked. Trossard and Emile Smith Rowe on the interiors is far more dangerous than Granit Xhaka and Martin Odegaard have been. Get Granit Xhaka back to doing what he knows how to do with his defensive awareness. Don't ask him to do things that he's not comfortable with, and get the players that are the most comfortable in those zones as you can. So that's been my big solution with the Thomas Partey, my little rant on it, and why I think we have had some issues with Mikel, which I hope he does look to tweak. Do I think he does all these things that, I'm asking him? Absolutely not. Like, I don't think he will, but this is my internal solution to what I believe that he should be doing. But Kern, I'm going to ask you really quickly, for you, Thomas Partey, did you have similar thoughts about how to solve it? Or rather,
Similar, not the
what
same, but similar.
okay, do you wanna go on what you felt like we could do? And then we'll
Yeah,
get
I
Chris
mean,
in
look,
here, and we'll try to transition to the game because we've got
yeah,
some
I mean,
screenshots
we
to
haven't
do.
talked about Man City for 20 minutes, but um, look, for me, I think that if we look at the teams we're coming up against, we're not coming up against a lot of, attacking firepower heavy teams, and I don't think there's going to be. I mean, if you look at Villa, for example, you're looking at someone like Ollie Watkins or Danny Ings being that sort of that outlet to try and hit and try and play in transition. But the main problem for me, I feel, is the midfield dynamics, and it has been. I think if you look at how you're balancing Granit Xhaka with um, Odegaard, you need that wide channel. You need it. You need the wide channel. You can't have um, basically static movement in that front line. On that left hand side, the whole reason that works is because Xhaka has the freedom to go and underlap or go wide. It's the rotations in that triangle between Granit Xhaka, Gabriel Jesus, and Martinelli. They all rotate, they all have freedom, they all can pop up in different zones and create from different zones or finish in different zones. And that's why Xhaka was going and getting goals as well as assists, because there was the freedom of movement. What we have with Eddie is we have a more traditional nine. We have someone that will basically he prefers to kind of not only just stay in the box, he can drop and link play. He's very good linking play in the opposition half. I just feel like I don't see him providing, as you mentioned, the wide overloads. I don't see. I mean, we look at Everton, for example. Where did the issues come? The issues came is because we were being doubled up wide consistently, and we didn't have that ability to really penetrate and get through the lines in the final third, as in going from wide to central. We weren't able to do that. My solution would be to have if, and this is obviously if Emil's fit. If Emil's not fit, then I have another solution. But for me, I feel like that we're not looking. I think we're being too um, we're not putting our playmakers in situations to succeed, basically, for me. So for me, I feel like Emil go to on the right. We have Odegaard drop. If it is Jorginho, then I would say have White there. I think will provide enough cover. I am aware that the duels will be harder. I am aware of that fact. I think our press will change structurally as well. I think that is going to be it'll be difficult. But for me, I feel like having Erdegaard a bit deeper on that left side, being able to have Zinchenko get into areas a bit higher up the pitch, having him be that. I think we've all on the channel said that. I think we think that Erdegaard will be on the left long term. I do think that this is the kind of situation where if you're looking for someone to link play, I think on that left side is where we've struggled. Jorginho has shown in this game, which we'll get into, that ability to drop and let at the time Tomiyasu go a bit higher on the right. I feel like Erdegaard, I don't think will be as good at it. I don't want to see him in left back areas, but what I do want to see is an ability to drop into areas that we can provide a numerical superiority and build up. I think that's the key for me. I think giving Zinchenko that option a bit deeper with Granit, he's trying
This
to be a
is
bit
this
higher.
is my major issue with people that suggest this, because you're basically replicating the same problem with Granit Xhaka and Zinchenko with this, because they would want to operate in the same types of zones. They would both want to
Um,
operate as somebody in that left half space that wouldn't be operating deep as a second ball collector. They both don't want to do that. And so I think this is the frustration
because
that
I
I
don't want to
maybe
play Zinchenko.
Well, if you don't want to play, then it could work in a sense of you asking Odegaard to be the deeper option. But again, when you do that, you then
That
run
was
into
the
the
next thing I was
issue
going to say.
of
I was going to have Tierney go a bit higher, and then have him be in the fifth channel,
and who
be
do
a
you
bit
have as your
higher.
left winger though?
My left winger would be Trossard.
So again, what you then have is Odegaard playing deeper though, and you'd have an issue with second balls, basically having Odegaard next to Jorginho.
Yes, correct. And that's where I said the duels is the only concern I have. But for me, I feel like we're not coming up against, if you look at, for example, Aston Villa, we're not looking to come up against an extremely dominant midfield. I don't feel like that's the case where I think the main threat will be Kamara. I mean, we'll get into this tomorrow, but for me, the main threat will be Kamara in midfield.
Well,
But
mate, you know what
I
I'm
don't feel like
thinking?
we have dual heavy midfield. I don't think that's where the game will be won and lost. I think the game will be won and lost out wide. I think wide areas where we've struggled and we haven't been able to create the chances in our front line.
Look, I think for me, the fundamental thing is teams are going to be looking to do what Brentford have done, what Everton have done with their players as much as possible. And what is that? They're going to vacate the middle third to kind of hopefully react to second balls from a pinned forward. And by the way, Villa are going to do the same thing with Ollie Watkins.
Correct.
They're going to go long and they're going to do it. So then your biggest concern actually becomes second balls. And so that for me is the issue. And I really don't. I understand that it's unpopular for people to kind of see by yes, Odegaard wouldn't start and Gabriel Martinelli wouldn't start. This isn't a thing to critique them as players. It's about what this team needs in the absence of Thomas Partey. And that's why he's so important. So if you're going to do it, I don't mind, but pairing somebody like a Zinchenko, an Odegaard next to a Jorginho by having two players that are very poor in transition, that is something that you can't look to concede, especially when you know that Thomas Partey does a job of two people. And it's not
Well,
just
my
a
thing is,
lowered
as you've
second
mentioned,
ball
the midfield
ability,
is vacated. That's the main thing for me. I think the vacated midfield would lead to, if they're going over the top, the main thing for me would be, as you mentioned, retrieving the second balls. But I don't think
but you
we're
won't
going
have
to.
that, right? Because you've then got Odegaard and or Zinchenko along with Jorginho, who struggle to do that. Like one of Jorginho's biggest traits was making sure that we could be in a position to have many interceptions. He's excellent positionally, but he won't be good enough to retrieve those second balls. So for me, you have two people in that middle third that struggle with the same fault. That is something that I don't think we can have.
So what you're
Ignoring
suggesting is a Xhaka Jorginho double pivot with an Odegaard being that elbow 10, or ESR being the elbow 10.
well, more so Ben White added to there as well, so that we can get that athletic horizontal
Of course, yeah,
agility.
Ben White as well. Yeah, of course.
And so you combine again, this is why I really think people should ask what is it that Thomas Partey gives us? And you give those traits in two players where you have Granit Xhaka, who's responsible for second balls. That's excellent. And then on the right, the reason that you can't have Tomiyasu instead of Ben White is we still need that horizontal agility to meet people like Ollie Watkins who go wide and retrieve that second ball. You need the running power so that you can leave Jorginho alone to purely think about possession. Once you do that, you basically solve what Thomas Partey is all in one player. The guy that starts attack, that collects second balls, and the guy that is responsible for defensive transition. Okay, because even Granit Xhaka, as much as he's great at second balls, he isn't the same in terms of meeting people in the channels. And you get that athleticism with a Ben White. Now, does it give you a little bit more to do in terms of the right hand side? Yes, that's why you need Emil Smith Rowe to really make this work. And that is like the crux of it. But guys, we've gone almost half an hour without being able to talk. Chris has patiently been joining us. Mate, how did you look at the game overall? And we'll have to get into some screenshots, but I'll talk a little bit about kind of what the statistics bore because I think it was a lot easier reading than people felt. What did you kind of think about with this with this performance?
I think we were definitely the better team. I think I think I was wrong in my prediction because I thought they'd beat us, and we really beat ourselves in the end. With the mistakes leading to the goals. The first goal was a mistake. The second goal was a mistake, and the third goal was kind of a mistake and poor tracking. But that goal they still had to do a lot of creating. But the first two goals they scored were literally just pass to a player and then they score really. But yeah, I think we were. I don't like going out of these games saying, "Oh, that we can praise the team," but you can. I think you can praise what the tactics. because I think they worked despite Partey not being there. I think they worked. I think we dominated the game. I think we put ourselves in great positions to create chances, but our final third play was, I don't know what to say. Like, our final third play was relegation form, like maybe even championship. Like, it was very inconsistent, very wasteful. Eddie, Xhaka, there's no point of even naming names. Everyone apart from Saka was poor in the final third. Um, and when you have that against, again, a team that, as Arteta said, the game's won in boxes. And when you're that poor in the box, no matter how much you create, and when you're creating for the other team as well, there's no way you're going to win that. So for me, it was just a factor of creating for the other team. Like, I was, obviously, we spoke in group chats after. I was just chilling. Like, people were saying, "Oh my God, we're done. We might drop out of top four." All this nonsense, but and this is our what are they saying? This is our Palace Brighton moment. All this type of stuff. Like, that's all I've been hearing since the game. But for me, it was encouraging, but at the same time, it was like it scared me a bit as well. At the same time, because one, we gifted them. Two, Mikel didn't change, and he's got back into the pattern of predictable changes. He brings on Trossard from 60 to 70, and then he brings on Vieira and Tomiyasu in the 80th minute. He's done the same thing 3 games in a row, and it hasn't worked 3 games in a row. So hopefully, versus Villa, he can change something, because something does need to be changed. But overall, it's bad to lose, but as soon as Partey was out, I didn't think we'd win.
Yeah, well, I think, mate, like the biggest thing is I'm putting up this graphic just really to explain it for everybody that maybe is a little bit confused about this. But, this should really calm a lot of people, in terms of, I agree with Yo-Yo here. There's definitely, okay, I'm going to be rude. There's a lot of pussies in the fan base that, don't have the stomach for a title race, really. But when you have a look at this running XG model, by the way, so Arsenal, of course, are the ones in blue, Man City are the ones in red. You can see a clear disproportionate increase in terms of Arsenal's ability right now to gain chances, and that's really clear in the first half. This was a domination, by the way, in the first half. This is what I wanted to show people because I really think this got misunderstood. And the first half, the intensity from the press by the boys was incredible, by the way. I think it was the first time that I've seen that intensity back. And so you can really clearly see here that really that didn't change until the moment in the 65th minute when you can see City's XG really jump and start to outwork us. Despite there being a little bit more time, this is the moment that Riyad Mahrez got subbed, by the way. And when Riyad Mahrez got subbed and we moved Bernardo Silva out to the right wing, that's when Arsenal had problems. I feel as though Gabriel and Zinchenko had a really poor job of marking the differences in Bernardo Silva moving out to right wing. And that's kind of reflected in the statistics here, where you see Manchester City increase quite a bit of their chances. Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say it was a big tactical change that was needed. Pep said himself that his tactics in the first half were shit. Like, he literally said, my tactics.
Yeah. Well, Grealish and Kevin De Bruyne said the same thing in their post matches.
Yeah. Bernardo couldn't deal with Saka, simply put. Yep. He couldn't deal with Saka. 3 fouls, 1 yellow card, all in the first half. Ederson started time wasting. It was the first time I ever in my whole life, since City have been here, first time I seen them go long consistently. Even though Pep was shy from the touchline from them not to, the players knew that was the only way. It was one of the only times I've seen the player just say, "We don't care what you're saying, Pep. We have to go long to Haaland." And two, it was they couldn't deal. Obviously, it was a transition game, but they couldn't deal with us on the right hand side in transition. And he knew.
How many fouls did Bernardo have in that first half?
He had 3 in the first half, all on Saka.
Like, even Pep admitted he got his tactics wrong because Bernardo was getting cooked again and again and again. So
in the second half, I think the change was the change to a back four allowed Diaz to step a lot higher. He was doing what Gabriel was doing, essentially just tracking the winger / striker all the way to the halfway line, regardless of where he went. And we didn't know how to adjust to that change. I think we did well, and we still kind of created, but as you can see on that graph, there was a massive plateau. Like, we didn't create anything for maybe 30 minutes, apart from obviously the pen. After the pen, really, it's probably our worst start to a second half the whole season. Like, I was saying before the game, we shouldn't be this 45 to 60 team, and they heard that, but they didn't listen to everything else. We were not a good 45 to 60 team. We were awful. And obviously City got their goal. They didn't really deserve it though. And obviously we spoke about on the last one that deserve or not, you still get the goals. But that's why I said it's encouraging. But at the same time, it's sad to see them like capitulate a bit. Like they couldn't adjust.
No, absolutely. And look, guys, so one thing that we definitely need to talk about is I agree. The ref definitely protected Bernardo Silva. It was very clear. And, I hope that the statistics kind of show you that it was a much more even match than maybe you guys could think. And, as Chris is kind of throwing in screenshots, Chris, just kind of bugger up in terms of us doing the screenshots when you're done with them. But guys, in terms of past progression, one person I really wanted to highlight here, it's William Saliba. Guys, William Saliba had a phenomenal game that I don't think many people are talking about. He was phenomenal breaking lines all throughout the game. He was really somebody that was excellent in terms of allowing us to escape pressure, and he did a very good job on Erling Haaland, more than what people are going to let you believe. And he was definitely our most progressive player in build-up here. And it was because of the fact that he was able to really be, that reference point for getting us out of the press. And I thought he just was oozing confidence. It was one of his better performances since pre-World Cup. I thought Saliba had a bit of an issue actually in the last month or two. And this was one of his best performances coming back. So I needed to highlight William Saliba. Curran, mate, for yourself, as we look at other kind of statistics in terms of who had kind of the increase in terms of them being able to add some threatening methods of scoring. One thing that I think I'm having a look at over here, you basically see that Jorginho had had a very good game in terms of his ability to get us out of pressure. But again, he did struggle a bit, and particularly Granit Xhaka in terms of decreasing the chances scoring as a passer. One of the good things that I think we've seen here is that the person for Arsenal that was really incredible was Bukayo Saka. You can kind of see it here. Who for you did a good job or could hold their head up high in terms of a chance creation side? Because I feel as though that's something that Arsenal have lacked in the last couple of games. And when you have a look at it, I think Man City and Arsenal played very similar structures. They both were a method of a 4-4-2, but we definitely had a little bit of a different perspective on how we utilized that. We definitely, I think, for me at least, had a little bit of a greater difference in the middle of the park, where Man City definitely overloaded wide, and we can see here we crashed a little bit more centrally, and that was in order to stop transitions. But what did you make kind of the overall story? And we'll get into some specific things in the first half, because I think Chris has some screenshots to share. But what did you make of our chance creation in this match? Because I feel as though when you have a look at it, the first half was beautiful in terms of chance creation, relying on our press. But in the end, if you actually count it, Eddie Nketiah,
yeah, that's the main thing.
Yeah, I mean, Eddie Nketiah has got 3 chances. Bukayo Saka has a wide open net that he delays. And, I hate to be somebody that critiques him, but he did poor on that chance. He really has to release earlier. And in the end, if you start adding up these goals that we've left on the pitch, you end up having a much more tolerable scoreline, don't you?
Of course we do. Of course we do. I think you look at some of the chances, the Bukayo chance where he delays. You look at the Eddie chance. I think we'll get into these with the header. I think there's a couple of really good chances there, which on a different day they just go in the back of the net. I think Eddie missed Martinelli with a one. I mean, there's a bunch of chances. We'll get into them, but I think for me, if you're talking about someone who stood out in terms of chance creation, I do want to put. I know he also struggled in the game, as you mentioned, but I do want to give a shout out to Jorginho. I do think his ability to just play these little chip balls through the lines was something we were missing a lot in against Everton and against Brentford at times. This ability to just lift the ball up a bit, spread the ball, get into positions where he can control the build up and really facilitate us getting into chances, getting into positions to create chances. So I get it. He did also struggle, but for someone who dislikes Jorginho as much as I do, I do want to give him a shout out, because he did do what exactly we thought he would do. So fair play to him.
Okay, excellent. So, I mean, for the most part, Eddie, I think, is probably the most frustrating player in this game if you do have a watch back with him, because at one token, he's probably our best outlet. and he's consistently running channels and being and offering himself as an option. But in those final moments, it is really poor. One thing I will say is that one clip that's doing the rounds on Twitter in terms of a reverse ball back out to Martinelli. It's a lot harder than people think. That's excellent defending by Ruben Diaz, by the way. So I really don't understand why that clip's going around. If anything, it's those chances that he's missed in terms of the two. In the first and the second half, he had clear headers that he missed. And of course, there was the one whipped cross by Tomiyasu that was excellent. And I really kept saying Eddie has to get there. There's really no excuse for me. And then when you combine the open play shot by Bukayo Saka, that is 4 open goal opportunities, by the way, that Arsenal created that we weren't clinical on. And if you leave 4 goals on the pitch against Manchester City, that's not going to happen. That's not going to lead to you to having a successful game ultimately. And in fact, if you leave 4 goals on the pitch for any game, that's not going to lead to a lot of success. So, very first thing is I'm going to give it over to Chris to kind of explain some of the screenshots because we've talked enough about the overview. We need to get into specific moments. So, Chris, I'll give it over to you to talk about basically the Eddie chance in the first half with that header because I think that's probably the first chance that we've got.
Yeah, it's probably, to me, his biggest chance because the other one, the defender closed in him. And maybe he could play that pass if he does it early, but it's a very, very hard pass to play, especially when you're completely focused on putting it in the back of the net.
Well,
And
he is sent.
was
Sorry,
on a
Chris. Like
great play as well.
he is sent wide with the pass, and I don't think Jorginho's at fault, by the way, because there's nothing on centrally, and it's just the way that City defended was beautiful. They did orient our ball out to the wide areas, right, and they did kind of stop. The way that Ruben Diaz follows up on that chance, I think, is beautiful, and he basically makes
great.
Eddie make a decision.
Yeah, exactly. He was great defending. He forced him to make a pass he'd probably make 1 out of 10 times, 2 out of 10 times, or try to put this in the back of the net and I'm going to close it down. And he tried to shoot a cross goal so that if it does get spilled, it's a tap-in. So you can praise him for that, but it was a very hard chance. So I did pick this chance. The header really, the ball was bobbling around in the middle of the park with Martinelli and Xhaka, bounces out to Zinchenko, who takes one touch and puts it on it was a great cross. I was complaining about his final ball the last couple of games, and this one was a great cross. I did put screenshot a bit early just to show how open Eddie was.
Yep.
But yeah, he put it wide, very wide, and it wasn't close. What did you make of this chance? Because I think the goal was begging for him to hit the target.
Like I said, I think Zinchenko had a really difficult game off the ball, but his first half deliveries were much more consistent compared to previous. And this is just one of the best examples of it. I think there's zero excuse right now. Ake is not contesting him for the ball. At the very least, you put this on target. And this isn't even just, a criticism. We know that Eddie can do better. He's very decent in the air. I don't think there's much of an excuse here because there's no Bernardo Silva that's on his back. Ake is nowhere near there. And I just think this is poor from Eddie. And it's one of the more glaring chances. I still think the one that he's coming in off a Tomiyasu cross in behind the box is the worst for me. It's worse than this because he had time to really look across the line and get himself in position. But this is equally just as bad. And I can't remember when this was, but this was very early on in the first half. And you basically secure this.
20th minute.
Yeah, and if you're able to do this and you go 1-0 up, I think the narrative of the story is very, very different. So this is a really good chance by us and a really poor miss by Eddie Nketiah.
Yeah.
I mean, the main thing is if you look at this chance and you look at this body position, he's just so eager. I think he's a bit over eager personally to get his head on the ball and he just misses it. It's disappointing, but he's got himself into a great position. Ake, who is, one of the best aerial centre backs in the league in terms of aerial duel winning percentage, he's completely lost. And Bernardo obviously doesn't have a chance, so he should really be burying that personally. But it is what it is. You can't get them all in, can you?
Yeah. After this, pretty much immediately after this, Man City building out from the back, and then again the long ball. Ederson plays a long ball after a good press from Saka and Eddie. Haaland wins the header in the middle of the park, and it's probably one of the only ones he really won in that first half. And Tomiyasu makes a mistake. Arteta said it's the first time we've seen him make that pass in 7 years of watching him play football. And it's not the first time we've made this pass. Gabriel did the same thing last year versus Wolves. So it's not the first time someone in this position did this. But yeah, and this is an elite finish. On your weaker foot, half volley, puts in over the keeper in the bottom corner. It was a great finish. Me personally, I didn't think he'd even score from that. But yeah, world class players make world class plays. And when you're gifting guys goals like this so early in the game, you're killing yourself. But yeah, what did you make of this goal, which was really just Tomiyasu assist for De Bruyne?
I will say it's a horrendous mistake by Tomiyasu, and we're saying this a lot in terms of individual mistakes in this half, but there's really nothing tactical about this. But the one thing that I really wanted to kind of mark on everybody was why Pep was so pissed with his tactics. I'm going to go back to this screenshot, Chris, at the very beginning, and force everybody to look. In the center of your screen is Bernardo Silva, who did operate as a left back quite a bit, but would join the double pivot to try to get out. And Martin Odegaard, for all his faults on the ball in this game, he was phenomenal off the ball and making sure with the press. And this is the one big thing why Pep had to go long often, because we were so intense in terms of our winger and Eddie blocking any opportunity for them to play a ball out to the center backs. And Bernardo Silva dropping into to form a pivot with Rodri was not successful at all because Martin Odegaard was doing his job as a 1v1 press. And so I think this is what really destroyed the Pep tactics ultimately, because he uses Bernardo as a release valve in the back line to really help them progress because Rodri can't do it on his own. And this for me is the really clear part of the chance. What Tommy does at this point is poor. We all know it. But for me, I would never want to have a clearance out to your keeper. I would always encourage, especially if it's on your weak foot, knock it to touch right there and regroup with your defensive line. For me, that's the best decision that I coach with my players. If you're on your weak foot running back, you need to put it into touch. Now, again, Tommy doesn't make this mistake, so there's no point hanging up on it. But the biggest thing for me talking about this is why Pep was so frustrated for the entirety of the half, and that was this moment here where Martin Odegaard is phenomenal off the ball. And actually, we're going to talk about it, but Granit Xhaka was very good in the first half. It was just in the second half that he was very poor. And I don't want to take anybody's meat off the bones. I'll let somebody else talk about that. But he's responsible for the goal. As much as people want to critique him and having such a poor game, he is responsible for that penalty. So again, maybe in the one moment, Saliba could have done better to really go against Holland, but he controlled Holland all night. So the one time that he does that, you don't expect your partner to do really the worst mistake that he could ever do in response to that. So sure, he could have done better, but all game he dominated Holland. So the 90% of the time he won that battle. The 110% time, you're really not looking for Tomiyasu to make that mistake so wide. The mistake has to fall with him ultimately. So yeah, that's a frustration, but I think one of the positives is you can see in the press here in terms of how Bernardo Silva is shut off and Rodri is unable to get the ball. And this is what forced Ederson to go long basically all of the first half. And this is why Pep was so frustrated. And he had to move Bernardo out from under there and go into the right wing to help them get out and create an overload elsewhere because they were having no success. So I think the next bit of play is basically talking about the goal, because beyond this, this was the story of the first half where we were dominating, forcing City to go long. We were basically on the front foot. And I'll basically ask, Chris, why don't you walk us through the goal, but, give it to Curran to analyze, because for me, this is an excellent ball by Granit Xhaka. And the only thing I'll say is it capped off an excellent first half that he unfortunately, like the team, strong first half, completely fizzled out to really poor in the second. But why don't you walk us through this goal?
Yeah, I didn't even want to show the build-up. I just wanted to show Xhaka. So Xhaka from here plays a lofted through ball, and as you can see, Eddie is making a run in between Diaz and Walker, and does actually very well to get there to beat Walker in a foot race. And Ederson overcommits as he always does. He was very restless. He came off his line, and Eddie did get it past him. He was going to score. Great clearance by Ake, and it was a foul, a clear foul. I saw people debating it. The commentator even said, correctly so, if a centre-back makes this foul, no one's complaining. I see the ref give it all the time, but people are complaining because they're keeper. But yeah, Penn, Edison tried to do mind games, and he put it exactly where he told him to, bottom corner. Saka, another goal and assist in a big
Heart
six.
was out of my heart was really out of the chest with that one. I
I
I,
saw
I
so
couldn't.
many. Wait, sorry, I saw so many people saying, "Ah, I need Jorginho to take this pen. I need
Oh hell
Jorginho."
no!
I was one of them for
I know
narrative
you were.
though.
I know,
For
no, no,
narrative.
no. But for narrative, if he takes the pen, then it takes away from Saka, in my opinion. Anyways, people say he doesn't have cojones. How can you let a guy come to your club and take?
No. For narrative, I needed it because he was labeled as somebody that was going to be the most horrific signing, and I needed him to be the first one to draw blood and get us level. But no, I agree. Like Bukayo Saka has to do it. He's your MVP. He has to step up to do that. And I loved him putting it where Ederson wanted him to put it. I thought that was amazing. And you know what? For all the flack that Bukayo Saka gets, he's a phenomenal penalty taker. Like the form is excellent.
He hasn't missed them.
Yeah. I mean, from the perspective of basically isolating your 10% of his unsuccessful takes on penalties, for the most part, he's phenomenal at them. So I'm really happy about this. But Curran, I wanted to ask you the question while Chris kind of uploads second half screenshots. What did you make of Granit Xhaka's involvement in terms of this goal? Because again, it's something that's not going to be talking about on Twitter. But he was phenomenal in the first half. This is not an easy pass. This is a brilliant ball by Granit Xhaka in terms of floating it in behind the defense, and it has to be inch perfect. It cannot be under hit, and I think he's done it brilliantly all season. And if Eddie can get there just a little bit sooner, he gets an assist on top of what's admittedly a very poor second half performance. But this is really the difference for us in breaking down these kind of blocks in the first half. What did you make of Granit Xhaka's involvement in this?
But this is what we've been talking about all stream. I mean, we've been saying that he needs to be, and we need more. I mean, we mentioned it in the preview as well about how we need to have more aerial. The balls need to be fun, maybe not play across the ground the entire time. Get some balls in the air and try and play over people. You don't have to play through them every time. We were talking more about the switches from right to left, but these kind of creative passes you need in against a block like this. I mean, you can see that if you look at the City structure, they're all that they're it's I mean, this the gap between the centre back and the fullback on the weak side is obviously large, but you've got three men. They're all basically trying to mark up for our front three. So to find a ball and find the space in that position is commendable, and it's something that we should be doing more. I think there's got to be really an issue there with how you look at things, because these kinds of things need to happen tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be a game where we're going to be playing against probably a 4-5-1 mid block. I know we're going into to tomorrow, but this is a key, something that will happen tomorrow. I really hope we see these kinds of runs and these kinds of balls. So yeah, encouraging, but we need more.
Yeah, and look, you've seen it given.
He got a yellow. He didn't get nothing.
Yeah,
He got a yellow for me. Like, you have to give a card for this. Obviously, he got a yellow straight after for time wasting, but he should have got a yellow here for fouling him on the pen, because he stopped.
Look, how many times has Bernd Leno got sent off for this exact follow through? We've seen it. So it's been given. I think it would have been harsh. I'll be honest. I don't think it's quite a red, but the follow through deserved a yellow, like kind of Chris was saying. I don't know when I've ever said he's had a poor penalty kicking technique. I've said he's not consistent with his ball striking.
But his penalty technique has definitely changed from the Euros, and it's
does.
Clearly something he's worked on over time, because the best players try to take flaws out of their game, but he hits the ball a lot cleaner. I think since the Euros, it was very clear in the Euros that he was going to hit the ball across his body.
Have you noticed the difference? Because for me, prior, he looked at the keeper. Now he has a set motion in mind, and he's not looking at the keeper to throw him. He knows where he's going to place it, and he's going to hit it, and he's focusing on contact as opposed to maybe trying to give people the eyes.
He always hits it hard and low. It's never keeper height, good height for the keeper. It's always hitting across the grass, and if the keeper gets there, he gets there. But no keeper so far has got there since Donnarumma, and that's now Alisson, De Gea, Mendy, and Edison now. So, four of the best in the league?
Yeah, but like to your latter question, he absolutely switched it, and it's one of the things that I've noticed though is that I don't find him trying to give people the eyes. I think at the Euros and stuff, he would look at the keeper, and it led to poor contact. I think he's just gone back to basics in terms of the penalty technique, in terms of picking a spot, going up, knowing what spot he's going to choose, and then focusing on the ball. And, I don't see him as much trying to look up and give people the eyes. And he's focusing on contact clean through, which is why the technique's a little bit better. I have said in the past, I don't like him giving the eyes because he hasn't been consistent in his ball striking. But I've always said Bukayo Saka has a short back lift. He has phenomenal technique when he wants to. And it's only particular instances where he does struggle. Like for me, on the run, it's still not absolutely consistent, but it's gotten way better this season. And I don't even know if you could say it's a weakness anymore.
On our pens, quick question. This is completely off topic, not even about City. Say we get into a penalty shootout, do you think he takes fifth again, like the Euros, to take the glory, or do you think he takes first?
Because I think he'll anchor personally. And it's what he'll want to do. For me, I'd rather him get in it early because I'd rather put the points on the board. I actually, as a coach, feel very differently. You get your most secure penalty takers, take them first. And sometimes coaches like to pair the first and the last as your best penalty takers, generally.
I actually don't think he's the best.
I don't in the squad, but he's one of the best for me. And so I think for me, the best one is actually Gabriel Martinelli. Right now, it's Jorginho. But, I don't know. I think Gabriel Martinelli is, for me, the most consistent in terms of ball striking, placement. He's my favorite from a penalty perspective. I think Trossard, we've also recruited somebody that's very good on penalties as well. And as is Jorginho, ironically, we've really upped our penalty-taking prowess with our, kind of depth decisions. But yes, and so... Yeah, no, exactly, mate. Yeah.
Back on topic.
Back on topic. So I'll let you take over the next phase of play.
The last big chance of the half, and this is something they did to us twice, actually, either side of the half. But here, they get a free kick, and Riyad Mahrez puts it in a great area. Tomiyasu gets his head to it, and Rodri headers it into the ground, which was actually I thought it took a deflection. It took a slight one off Ake, but yeah, he headers it into the ground and he hits the bar to close off the half. George, what did you make of this chance, and what did you make of Man City's threat from set pieces? Surprisingly, because this is not the only one where they nearly scored from in this game.
Can I ask you? I'll just answer it really quickly with a question, Chris. Who's behind the header at this moment in time?
Zinchenko.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. Who is it?
Yeah, Zinchenko is the one standing behind Rodri.
Once again, we have another instance where, look, I love what he can offer, but let's talk honestly. He has very poor awareness, not just from set pieces, but tracking runners just in general. And it's Zinchenko losing his marker, fundamentally. He doesn't lose his marker. They don't get this chance. And by the way, this is a great header because I actually don't think Riyad Mahrez necessarily gives him the best opportunity to score. Like, it's a great ball into the box in the mix zone generally, but this is a difficult chance to get on target, much less off the crossbar. So again, from an Arsenal perspective, it's just such poor defending from Zinchenko, who we know this is a weakness. And when people talk about his aerial dual competency, that's more higher up the pitch in terms of the middle third. In terms of his awareness off set pieces, it's horrific. And he was struggling all game.
It's from a standstill. When you have to compete in a duel that he's standing from, that he can't run and create momentum. That's how he wins his headers. Because he never wins them from a standstill. He has to hit the man hard, and it will become like do I give the foul or not? And he rarely gets fouls. He's made maybe 2 this whole season. But yeah, that's how he made this mistake. And it's not the only one he made this game. And again, not to harp on, but he was not good. But yeah, this wasn't the only time they hit the bar or hit the post this game.
It's mad,
so
you know.
the only time they hit.
You know what the funniest thing is about the amount of times they hit the post is I think the chances have distorted the narrative about this game. I think the fact that they had that flurry in the second half has really distorted how people are looking at this game. And
whatever happens
it's frustrating.
People remember, and they finished the game a lot better than we finished it. So everyone just remembers that. But into the second half, another free kick, this time taken from De Bruyne. Exact same area, just taken by a different player. The same player wins the header, Rodri, in the same position, this time against Gabriel. Good save from Ramsdale. It was really straight at him, but at his feet. Ramsdale, good save. Akanji here rebounds, and George's man of the match cleared it off the line. Probably one of his highlights of the game. We needed that because at this point the pressure was on. Just before this, Haaland had that chance 1v1 of Ramsdale. I didn't think it was necessary to show, but it was another mistake by Zinchenko and Gabriel. But yeah, what did you make of this? Because another set piece, we failed to beat a team who generally aren't that good in the air. What did you make of this, guys?
I mean, the thing is, and I just feel like we collapsed too deep. I don't know about you, Chris, but I feel we collapsed too quick. I think they, as you can see, look at Grealish's position, hanging deep, and we just kind of collapsed towards the goal and tried to basically just clear our lines, whereas they kind of held back and found space.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was poor because I think this pre happens, and then right after this, Zinchenko makes a horrific mistake in build up to put Ramsdale on a very difficult mistake, and then I'm sure we're going to talk about the goal, Chris, that you're going to walk us through. But this is 3 in a row in 5 minutes that we suffered from very stupid individual errors that pile on pressure for us. And I agree. We talked about it in previous pods. Nicholas Jover has to have a rethink about defensive set pieces because we're struggling. I will say Zinchenko is a real big problem in terms of the back line for this because he's a main culprit that they really look to target quite a bit. Because I think they tried to combat this with adding a little bit of Tomiyasu. I'm really being honest. That was probably a major portion for wanting Ben White among other things in terms of his dynamism, but it wasn't something that we dealt with well whatsoever. And I think a big reason for that is kind of when you have a look at, Rodri winning the header here, he just out jumps Gabriel, which is kind of rare, but look at where Zinchenko and who he's marking. Ruben Diaz, arguably one of the better headers of, Manchester City. So right there for me.
It's him, Ake, and Rodri are the 3 best, and they pinned Rodri in the first free kick, and they pinned Rodri on him in the first free kick, and Diaz on him in this one. So it is clear he is a target, and on another day, they score instead of hit the bar.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, he was a target for Manchester City on set pieces, and so we do have to have a rethink about that. And but that's going to be a case no matter when he plays. But for me, the frustration was the mistake right after that in build up. He has a really poor pass to Aaron Ramsdale, who bails him out because that was ridiculous. And then I'm sure you're going to walk us through the goal, Chris, really quickly. But Gabby then makes a mistake right after the Zinchenko error. So from here, you've got 3 errors in the span of 5 minutes, and that immediately set the tone. And I think right after that point is when you end up having, we'll talk about the goal in general, but right after the goal, I think you end up having the Bernardo Silva to right wing substitute to really take it over the edge. But that was the momentum shift in the match because I think this happened around the 60th minute, if I'm correct, and because they scored something in the 62nd or something like that, didn't they, Chris?
Yeah, they did. They scored in the 63rd, I believe it was.
Yeah.
That Grealish goal. Let me walk you through the goal because again, it was another chance. As it's annoying to see everything just be created by yourself because the set pieces
That's
could have
the
been
worst
avoided.
bit, isn't it? It's so annoying that it's self-inflicted. Like
Yeah,
we're
everything
doing this. I mean, I understand their press was on it that second half, and fair play to them. They did press well that second half, but man, these mistakes, you can't expect to be winning a title and make these kind of mistakes. We have to secure up our build up, and I feel like our centre backs need to, get it together a bit. I think both of them. I think Saliba and Brentford, and even though I think Gabriel had a good game last night, there were a couple of moments where he was shaky as well. So
like he nearly gave away a pen. Luckily,
against Haaland, but it was luckily offside. Yeah, I know.
What?
But as I said, he's a bit shaky last night. I think both of them need to get their heads together and just think, okay, hang on a second, what we're doing. We need to get back on form, start winning those aerial duels, start being a bit more progressive.
On this yo-yo comment, offensively, they still are. We're still top 4 in the league for most goals scored from set pieces, but we're not bottom 4 anymore for least goals conceded because we were joint bottom with Newcastle on 0 a couple games ago. Now I think we conceded 2.
We've conceded a quarter of our set piece chance creation in the last 3 games. That should tell you everything.
A lot of chances from them.
A quarter of the season's conceded XG on set pieces has happened in the last 3 games.
So yeah, evidently something has to change. But yeah, getting to the goal, I just checked it was the 72nd minute, not the 62nd minute. But yeah, just after the Trossard change that Arteta always makes. Gabriel here, really just Zinchenko passed it to him, and Gabriel turned and faced and couldn't make the pass to Xhaka that he was trying to make. I think it was silly of them to keep playing in this space after being punished for it 3 times before this. Before the 72nd minute, they were punished 3 times from 60 to 70, and they kept doing it. And they were bound to score at one point. Here Bernardo intercepts the ball. Bernardo plays a through ball to Haaland, who was onside. And for the first time, I think was not first time, but he was very aware in this because Haaland probably at the start of the season doesn't. I don't think he plays the pass first time, but he did. He plays the pass first time. Gundogan gets an assist, and Grealish gets the goal from the Tomiyasu deflection, who you'd beg him to try block it, and he does very well to get across, but it just hits the bottom of his calf and bounces over Ramsdale. What did you guys make of this goal and the cumulative mistakes that resulted in this goal? Because it wasn't the first one, as you said.
I think one of the major frustrations for this is I'm going to go back to the Grealish last still. And unfortunately, the Tomiyasu deflection actually is what causes the goal. Because I think if Aaron Ramsdale gets a clear view of this, it's straight at him.
He saves it, yeah.
One of the biggest things from a goalkeeper's perspective is when you talk with your defenders and you are coaching a goalkeeper, typically when you talk with your defenders, look, if you're going to get across and you're going to want to intercept or block the ball, then you make sure that you stop the ball entering. Otherwise, get out of the way. It's better for a goalkeeper to have a clear vision of the ball in order to receive it, as opposed to a defender shuffling across and gambling whether or not he's able to make the interception. Now, of course, you're never going to hammer a defender for doing that because it's just something that they're naturally going to want to do. It's their defensive instinct. But from a goalkeeper's perspective, I think Aaron Ramsdale is going to be a little bit annoyed with Tomiyasu and would have preferred him to maybe block the near post shot and allowed Aaron Ramsdale a clear view of the ball. But we all know that Gabby makes just a horrific mistake at this point in time. I don't think Zinchenko helps him, by the way.
He plays the angle. The angle is already small for you, but you give it to someone where the angle is even smaller because he has more men in front of him. Because Zinchenko only had.
Where's he going to turn?
But this is my frustration because look, no matter what, look, Gabby, I don't want to get it away. Let's make sure because everyone's going to say you're piling on Zinchenko. But again, Gabby makes the mistake. We know this. But from this position, by the way, Zinchenko has to recycle the ball to Aaron Ramsdale. He's got the ball previously. Just recycle it out to Aaron Ramsdale. We start again. It's crowded in that point of time. Let's make sure that we play out. Like, play it safe. Sorry, Karen. Like, I'm really upset because I feel as though he gambles here, and he just gambled the play before. And this is an example of Zinchenko being emotional. And I'm sorry, but for everybody on Twitter that keeps talking about the fact that he's your defensive leader and he's so composed in terms of his technique, this is something that he struggled with in the last 3 or 4 games. He gets too emotional. He makes inconsistent technical errors. And, all the work in the first half that he was so good on his deliveries was kind of poorly made in terms of his decisions and buildup right now. And in fact, a big reason that people keep telling me that Zinchenko's picked over at Kieran Tierney is for his calm decision-making and turning radius and buildup. And yet we're seeing very clear errors, not just in this goal, but, moments before where Aaron Ramsdale bails them out. And this isn't the first time. I think Zinchenko has had a real tough time lately. And it's not the first time that we've seen it. It's because he gets far too emotional in the game state. He needs to calm down, and he needs to make better decision-making. And I think it's time that we give Kieran a shot because for all the things that Kieran got levied at, right now Zinchenko is failing to do what I think a lot of people told me he was capable of doing. And I always questioned this. Zinchenko is excellent technically, but right now he absolutely is somebody that's a little bit more emotional. I don't think he's used to the leadership role that we've thrust him into necessarily because he's making some routine errors that he's letting the nature of the game take over. And we don't need that from our leader, experienced player.
But him being the technical leader now has changed the dynamics of the midfield.
Yep.
Has impacted certain players. Obviously, Partey had a very good game before this, but before the last game, he wasn't really having a great time.
No, he wasn't. But the one thing I did want to say, just quickly, Chris, is put that back up, whoever had it. If the main thing is, and this is where I struggle. I struggle a lot. Is I feel like a lot of people look at mistakes in isolation. You look at Gabriel here, and you're like, oh, come on, mate, what are you doing? But why is he put in that situation? Why are we leaving Gabriel with his back to his opponent and being pressed by two players? It shouldn't really be the case. I think obviously Gabriel or Zinchenko, whoever it is, need to just put it back to Ramsdale and recycle.
Or we could
But
have had Mr. As the fans call him, Mr. Hoofball in there, and he
yeah,
gets rid. Like, get rid of it. City
like
would.
honestly, what have we been calling for the last two games? We've been calling for more over the top balls to release our main outlets.
When
In
you
Czechia,
can't
and
go through somebody and you
you go
can't go
over.
around somebody, you go over them. That's been the thing that I kept saying the last couple games. And
Exactly. I mean, I feel like people are too obsessed with tech and oh my god, skills.
People aren't even obsessed with tech. They don't know what tech is.
Agreed.
They don't know what tech is. They just
No,
think
but this
leap.
is what really annoys me. I feel like people are more obsessed with actually looking at slick build-up play than actually being effective at the game of
It's not,
football.
I don't even think it's about build up. They're just obsessed with a player who lacks pace and is good with the ball at his feet. That is what a techie player is to most people.
And the thing
Someone
is,
who,
most of the people that these guys idolize have enough physicality to deal with the tech. That's what the most annoying thing is. But we're veering off the point. I think we need to get to the third goal before we do head off. I think
well, yeah.
let's just
From here, this is probably the only goal they really created because even after certain mistakes, they still had to do a lot. Here, Rodri just laid off the ball to Gundogan. You can see Xhaka was chasing Rodri, and he just couldn't keep up. Gundogan does well to progress the ball there. Trossard tries to close him down, but doesn't do well enough. Zinchenko let
can
because
you
you
can you go back to that,
no,
Chris?
give me a sec.
Is
Give me a sec. Zinchenko
mhm.
Zinchenko allowed De Bruyne to drift between him and Gabriel because, as you can see here, they're at least 5-10 yards between each other. And Zinchenko is watching the play right now. There were other angles, but we don't have a lot of time. Zinchenko is watching the play right now, and here they're level, and they shouldn't have been. Zinchenko should have closed the pass off, but anyways, Zinchenko doesn't. Gabriel, De Bruyne plays the first time pass across the box. Haaland takes a heavy touch and slots it with his right foot in the bottom corner. Ramsdale can't do anything there. Gabriel can't really do anything. So at this point, it was 3-1 game done. Haaland gets his goal. What did you guys make of this goal and
didn't close the space. It's very
how
simple. It didn't close the space. You mentioned it already. Didn't close the space. When you can't leave Kevin De Bruyne in a position where you can drive, you just can't do it. It's just not. It's not something you do. You look at it. You can just see it here. I mean, I don't like looking at static images. Obviously, we do a lot on the channel, but even in this position, you can see you can go to the next one. He's still in space. Like he's not being closed down. He's not in any position where he's in trouble. He can do what he loves doing. He can drive to the byline, cut back, get into positions to succeed, and get the third goal in it. Game over. So it's annoying. It's really annoying. But after this, even though we were 3-1 down, I was thinking, you know what, get one back before 90.
No, I was not. I was not. The game
I
was.
was. I was. I was like,
We
come
were
on,
saying stuff
last
that
5 minutes, go on, get one, and then make it uncomfortable. Just anything.
this game was.
Pure copium.
Oh,
Just
at 1-1,
complete copium.
well, at 1-1, I knew the game was done. I even put £40 City to win it.
Serious. At 1-1.
Yeah, I had money on City. I told George this. At 1-1, I had money on City to win just because the way the game was going, the way we were gifting chances. You can't gift.
Did you guys see it? Did you guys see what I put in the group at halftime? I said, look, I'll take a draw, just don't lose.
But no,
Just
but
don't lose.
you can't gift Haaland and De Bruyne and Grealish these chances.
So annoying.
Just to
man.
clarify, I think at the 1-1 that you're talking about, it was more from the 45th to the 60th.
No,
minute,
1-1
not-
second half, not
Yeah, not right
like,
at the first half because we
even at
were
half
extra.
time. I was like, at half time, we can win this. 55th minute in onwards, the game was done because we didn't do anything for that first 10 minutes. As I said, it's our worst start to a second half all season.
Which is strange because it's something that we've traditionally been good at. But look, I think fundamentally when you have a look at this game, I'll go to like both Chris and Curran for their thoughts overall. Once again, I hope this was good therapy for everybody. But kind of Chris, what's your last like punchline message? And we'll keep it very short in terms of what your takeaways were from this game.
Really, we dominated. I think 2 we obviously we self-harmed. And again, I advocate against self-harming, so it's not good to self-harm.
Good. Keep the algorithm on our side. Good.
yeah, it's not good to self-harm.
Good.
Yeah, we did that, and I think there's players who have been poor for a couple games, but no one's talking about them, and they're talking more about Martinelli and Nketiah, and it's Nketiah's fault. Martinelli's rubbish, and vice versa. And Eddie needs to be dropped. Erdegaard needs to be dropped. If Eddie needs to be dropped, Erdegaard needs to be dropped. Zinchenko needs to be dropped. Xhaka needs to be dropped. So how many players are we going to drop? And how many players who actually deserve their place? Because for me, if we're going based on performances, not a lot of these players in the last 3 games deserve to keep playing. So why do we keep singling them out? But yeah, takeaways. Saka is elite. That's my number 1 takeaway. Saka is elite. Thomas Partey keeps letting us down when we need him. It's another big game where he's let us down and not been fit. And I think we can bounce back easily. That performance has given me.
I think we will. I do think we will. It's just
easily because
depending
that was a
on what we're
dominant
going to do next game.
performance. Against any other team, we probably beat them 4-5-0.
Guys, here at Ball Over Passion, we pride ourselves on answering the question. I said 1 takeaway, and we've got a whole synopsis.
But I can't give just one.
I know. I'm just bugging because I do the same thing.
I don't even give one prediction.
No. Let's just remind everyone. Chat, you can remember this as well. We started off with a 15-minute rant from Mr. George V _AFC how we should change everything.
Chill. I'm wasting time in order for us to get our shit together. So don't worry about that. So Curran, give us your final takeaway on the match generally. Final takeaway.
No. I think the main thing is just don't overreact. I think that's the main way to take away from this. I think it's a good game. I think we got done in moments. It was self-inflicted. I don't think City are great. This isn't the same City team of 2018. This isn't a Centurion team. Let's see what Steve Cooper has for us. You never know. But I think in general, we've got players coming back. I think Emil's going to be so crucial for us. But this game, I enjoy watching us play. That's the main thing. I enjoy watching us play. I really do. I really enjoy watching us play football. There's no other team that I enjoy watching like I watch playing us than I was playing. We play such entertaining, such good football, and I love these guys. So just keep on giving them that support and let's get behind them for Villa tomorrow. By the way, I don't know if we're doing a preview tomorrow because it's 12:30 and George is, in Canada. Unlucky. But if we do, we'll let you know. But I took it away from him last time, so go on, do your thing.
Yeah, no, just really, I'm going to give myself to do a last-minute thing, as I agree. Mikel has to pivot, and he does have to stop the bleeding. We spent a large portion of this podcast talking about solutions. I hope to see at least one of them. When we do have a look, essentially, on what I could take away from the game is I really think as though people overreacted. I think that we were a lot better than what people kind of said. I just want to put up this graphic once again in terms of looking at our cumulative expected chances, and we left a lot of goals on the pitch. Everybody knows that we weren't clinical enough in this match, and I think it was beyond just that. We had very good performances throughout. And one of Pep's biggest criticisms, by the way, was he wanted the wingers to become a lot more narrow to kind of provoke Arsenal to go to one side, but we didn't. We didn't get drawn into that, and we actually moved City quite a bit around. And in terms of what he was able to change, he basically had kind of, Jack come a lot more wide in terms of Grealish, and that's what happened when Bernardo Silva was able to go out to the right wing. And so he changed the wingers really from being narrow out to wide, and he was able to add a midfielder to kind of help with an overload there. And that's what was the biggest difference that we struggled to cope with a little bit, but it was a lot better than what people thought. And I hope that maybe these chances that we've left on the plate and also the intensity that we showed in our press in the first half is something to really help people feel confident about us going forward, because I know I sure did. Ultimately, for me, guys, thank you so much for for sticking with us in terms of the preview. We'll let you guys know. I may not be able to make the preview, but I'm sure these two can handle. You're in very capable hands here. Thank you guys for sticking with us. Please, if you guys could throw a like on the channel, we would really appreciate it, especially before you guys head out. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. You hit the bell for notifications to know when, in fact, we do upload. In terms of all the boys' socials, you can find me at GeorgeV_AFC. Of course, Curran, you can find him at Curran BoP, and Chris is at CKFTBL. You can find us Ball Over Passion on YouTube or at BoP Footy on the Twitter. So, guys, thank you so much for sticking with us. We're going to have a big game. We are going to do a preview tomorrow, for sure. But we'll catch you guys for the preview tomorrow as we preview Villa, which is Emery return. That's going to be fun. So we'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks for sticking with us, and we hope that you guys enjoyed it. So peace, everybody. We'll catch you tomorrow.
Good evening.